So I'll just introduce you then, Josh. So Josh Williams from Ambient Wealth. Thank you, Josh, for joining us today. You're the financial expert that I've been using for some time and helps a lot of my followers and that. So Josh, just give us a little bit of intro to yourself for people that don't know you.
It's nice to be called an expert, I guess. But so speaking about myself, I moved over to Spain almost 10 years ago now, after working in finance with my father and his company in the UK. Gained my qualifications back there and moved over 10 years ago. And it's been a journey over here, working with expats, understanding the laws, the treaties, the exemptions, and there's lots to understand, and that's where I provide sort of quite personalized advice to clients, especially since setting up Ambient Wealth. So I'm the owner and director of Ambient Wealth. Set up Ambient nearly 2 years ago now, after seeing a sort of a niche in the market to provide transparent and more personalized expat advice. After working with a couple of firms over here, didn't see that was necessarily the case all the time. That's myself, very settled here in Spain, and look forward to
Where are you, Josh? Just tell us a little bit where you are.
So I'm based in the south of Spain, in Malaga, just in between Malaga and Marbella on the coast. I frequently visit Seville. I have family connections in Sevilla, so I travel in between Malaga and Seville quite often. But although based in the south, I have clients all over Spain. Many in Andalusia, but others in Barcelona, in Galicia, and Madrid, in Extremadura, weird and wonderful places. And I do travel to visit clients, but based in the south, but not limited to the south.
And with everything online nowadays and easy access to everything, most of the work is done or can be done online, Josh. So it doesn't really matter about where people live or where they move to in Spain, does it?
Correct. So COVID allowed that. One of the few silver linings of COVID has opened up that comfortableness with online video communications. Before, it was very face to face, especially when you're talking about finances. And some people still have that approach, which I understand and respect. Others are more open to the convenience of a video call, which can save a lot of time in travel. So COVID has opened that up, and we speak to a lot of clients via telephone, video. Video is most common, but also face to face is what I prefer as well, if I'm honest.
Yeah, so Josh, the reason I do these videos with my experts is that I've been here for 24 years now this year, 24 years, and there's a lot of British people that come here and they're not sure about certain things, and advice, sometimes you go and find somebody, you have to pay for it, it can be expensive, and they're a little bit slow in coming forward, the British people. So these completely free consultations with people to start with initially, and the experts that I provide, people like yourself that I know and trust for some time, and you offer free advice to my members on my websites and my Facebook groups. But doing calls like this, people can jump on the call, or we set it up and record it and post it post-date. Like this will be posted later on as well. So it helps people get the right information so they can make better decisions here. I've seen so many horror stories of people moving here, and like just the other day on Facebook, somebody said, been here for a year now and I need to change my driving license, and and I said, you had residency here for a year, and you haven't changed? Technically that's breaking the law. You have to change your driving license within 6 months. They've been driving here, technically if they get stopped by the police, the license isn't valid. And how somebody can be here a year and not know that, it's pretty much everywhere all over the internet. But getting help and advice helps you avoid these little problems. So Josh, I appreciate your time today and everything. So how do you want to start off today? We're going to talk about a few things: pensions, taxes, and that. How do you want to start?
So I think so the title of the webinar, if you like, is Securely Investing as a Tax Resident in Spain. Now I know talking about tax isn't everyone's idea of a good time, but the aim today is to give people a practical, honest guidance, if you like, and answer real life questions that people might be sitting on. So it's to make it relaxed, you know, Q&A focused. I know you've got some questions for me, and I can run through some commonly asked questions that expats typically ask. But, you know, focusing on what you mentioned there, people move over to Spain, they don't know what the differences are. Some people can be quite naive and just think that it's the same, you know, it continues to be the same, with declarations and reporting of assets. You know, it is very, very different legislation, different jurisdiction. But we're going to focus on today the tax efficiency available for Spanish residents, investment options, especially post-Brexit, dealing with ISAs, pensions, lump sums in the bank or in investments, and also Spanish compliant options and what they mean for people living here, avoiding common tax pitfalls, and also protecting wealth long term. And it's as you know, David, you worked with me for a while now. You know, I'm not a salesy person. This is not a sales pitch. It's just real guidance based on
information to give people in it. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So, you know, coming on to why being a tax resident in Spain changes everything. You know, to bring it to basics, being a tax resident in Spain requires an individual to be here for 183 days a year. This is just 1 day over 6 months. Worldwide income is reportable. Again, that's a common issue that people think, oh, I only earn in Spain, or I only earn a state pension, or I only have pension income, whatever it may be. And wherever it may come from, it needs to be reported in Spain if you are a tax resident in Spain. Yes, there's double taxation treaties with different countries for different taxes. However, it's important to understand what they are. That's something that we can help with. But if there is tax paid at source in the UK on a sale of property, for example, and you pay your tax in Spain, the capital gains tax, you declare that you've paid that tax in the UK, and it will be offset against your Spanish tax. So reduce that so you don't pay twice. UK tax wrappers, so ISAs for investments, you know, individual saving accounts, very common. Premium bonds, again, you know, my grandmother, bless her heart, she you know, put a lot of well, not a lot, but she used to give me presents, you know, when I was younger, 20 quid here and there into premium bonds, and say one day we'll make the million. But averagely, you know, looking at that over a period of time, it's not a great investment anyway, even if it's as a UK tax resident. But people like the surprise, but it doesn't provide any tax benefits to someone living outside the UK, same as ISAs, and SIPs as well. You know, so then they may no longer be tax efficient for someone living overseas and in Spain in this instance. And also with tax residency, it's important to understand the structuring from the start to avoid tax traps. So to make sure that you're not overpaying tax on investments or growth, sale of properties. There are ways and means to reduce taxation, but it does come down to individual circumstances. So
everyone's different, and areas do change a little bit of different rules and regulations, and did a little bit here in Spain, don't they?
Correct. Yeah. Even in Spain itself, you know, you've got Spain as a whole who have their national rules when it comes to tax, particularly inheritance tax is a big one, wealth tax as well. But so Spain sort of set the rules, and then each individual autonomous community, I'm in Andalusia, where Malaga is, same as you, David, in Almeria. Andalusia does not have a full exemption for wealth tax. Whereas if you go to Valencia or the Valenciana region, Alicante, where a lot of British expats do end up, there is wealth tax to contend with. So people, you know, need to understand what the tax scenario is in the area that they're moving in Spain, not just in Spain as a whole. So Andalusia is quite, you know, beneficial.
On that story, Josh, I heard a story a little while ago from one of my other expert advisors that a British person here, a husband and wife had died and left the house to their to their son and daughter. I think there was 3 children scattered around the world, and the property was worth over $500,000. They weren't living in Andalusia, as you say, that's got you don't have to worry about the inheritance tax. So there was an inheritance tax to pay, and it was quite a lot of money. Maybe you can tell me what it would be roughly on $500,000, but the kids didn't have, well, the kids were grown up, they didn't have the money to pay the tax, because the tax had to be paid before they can inherit the property. So they was in limbo, and I don't know what happened, but it was a big problem, because they didn't have the money to pay the tax to inherit the money. So you can imagine the nightmare scenario on that one.
Yeah, that's again a difference, going a little bit off, but with the inheritance tax, it's the individual who is benefiting who the tax liability lies with, rather than in the UK, it's with the estate of the deceased. So it's complete opposite. So it's based on the individual that's benefiting in Spain and their existing wealth. And then, as you correctly said, the tax needs to be paid prior to receiving that wealth. So there can be problems, with receiving that wealth, but there are ways to combat that, with use of wills and make sure it's written under the correct laws, having finances structured appropriately, assets in jurisdictions that, are tax neutral, rather than in the UK, living in Spain. So yeah, there are ways to combat it, but the burying heads in the sand and not taking any action can lead to problems for family members, especially when they may be grieving, in times of hardship. So it's important to plan for that, for the future.
Proper advice.
For sure. So yeah, I mean, some of the you mentioned a common questions there that expats ask. I think I touched on a couple there, but one of the most common one is do I have to report my UK rental income or pensions? And the answer to that is yes. Although UK rental income, again, is taxed at source in the UK and needs to be reported in the UK as well if the property is in the UK. You make that declaration in the UK, then you make the same declaration in Spain, and you provide the proof that you've paid the tax in the UK, and then whatever the amount is in Spain, say if it's 25%, you've paid 20% in the UK, then you'd pay that 5% in Spain, that missing amount. Pensions, depending on the pension, there are very few that are taxed at source in the UK, being civil service pensions. Some of them are taxed at source, so they shouldn't be taxed in Spain, but the majority are taxed only in Spain as income. Another common one is my payment commencement lump sum, or what's known now as a tax-free cash, TFC, in the UK of 25%. Is it tax-free? People assume it is. It's tax-free in the UK, yes, but it's not tax-free in Spain. It's treated as income, and that 25% could bolt on a large amount onto existing income for that tax year, and then potentially create a 40 to 45% tax charge. If that's managed correctly and it's taken over a series of years, you can reduce that tax liability. So that's important. What other questions you've got?
I think I said to you before about, some British people that are retired here, as most of them are, well, I don't have to declare my tax. I'm not earning anything. I've been here for years and I'm not earning any money, but they do, don't they?
Correct. Yeah. Even if you're not earning, that declaration does still need to be put forward. It's very cheap. It's a very simple declaration. I've got some clients that do it themselves, log in and put the boxes in, but just to have that assurity and that, that comfort that you're not going to get a knock at the door or an email or a letter through the door to say, you get those yellow slips that you have to go to the post office and pick up a package because it needs to be signed for, and it's from, the Hacienda. That's not something you want to be doing for the sake of a small declaration. So make sure that, you are declaring, and if you're unsure, then speak to an expert, speak to a tax advisor, speak to financial advisor like ourselves, just to make sure you're doing what you are doing is correct. And if it's not, and you're appropriately advised to do so.
Yeah, good. Good information there, Josh. Yeah,
no, for sure. What else is there? How can people leave?
Sorry, Josh, I just want to put this in now, and I'll put it in at the end as well. That if anybody wants to get in touch with Josh to have a free consultation, you do a short consultation for any of the people that come through any of my links to get some information firsthand, and then later on, if they take up any business, that's between you and them. But it's worth having a quick free consultation with somebody like yourself. So I just wanted to put that in there. Thank you very much, Josh, for offering this to people that follow me.
Yeah. So I'll cover that at the end as well. But with your listeners, a 15-minute chat, discovery call, as I like to call them, discovery conversation, where we understand, what a client's needs are, what they're looking, what they have, what they're looking to achieve. If there's a gap there, how do we bridge that, and close that? And then we'll organise a follow-up call to run through in a bit more detail. Again, complimentary. And then I can put together some of my views and initial thoughts as to what planning should be undertaken and why that planning should be undertaken and what it would mean to the client based on their circumstances and their goals. It's our mission to provide the best advice to our clients, and look forward to doing so. But there's lots of areas to understand in Spain. It's not so straightforward, hence the need for services like ourselves. But there are ways to invest cautiously, effectively, without any legal issues, to achieve a level of growth from investments as well, without taking too much risk, and to provide comfort that if anything happened to policyholders, then the inheritance tax wouldn't be an issue, especially with jointly held policies, where the plans would simply just continue in the surviving spouse's name without any taxes, without any probate, without any freezing or embargoes of accounts. It's just nice and straightforward. That's what we advise our clients on. Again, every client's different, as you said. What may work for you, David, may not work for me. So it's important to understand.
I think one of the other things I said to you earlier about questions that I get people who I feel are interested in is, investing money. A lot of British people, anybody that moves here to Spain, they've sold up, most of them in the UK, and they've bought their house, and they've got some money in the bank which they're living off, and sometimes that's quite a lot of money just sitting there, and the banks offer pretty much nothing as far as interest, a way of earning on your money here in Spain, and the people, mostly the British people, a little bit dubious about investing money. You hear these horror stories and that, but there are some pretty safe options and short and long-term investments that they can do. So do you want to just give us some idea about that, Josh?
Yeah. So some of the providers that we work with, just to drop a name, Prudential, they provide a Spanish designed or Spanish compliant investment for British, designed for British internationals or British nationals that are now living in Spain. Everyone knows Prudential, one of the largest financial institutions. Everyone may remember the Prue man that used to knock at the doors back in the UK. So they're an established company with hundreds of millions under management. And we work closely with them and provide and offer their products. And one of those products, as I mentioned, is the Spanish compliant investment, typically designed for the more cautious investor. So they would have internal funds. So it's not permitted to, if you think about it, Prudential are the structure or a vehicle, just like a pension policy with Prudential or Scottish Widows or Aviva in the UK. And then within that structure, you have your investment funds. A lot of providers and some other Spanish compliant structures allow external funds within this structure, which can be beneficial and is more suited to the, your balanced investor or, more adventurous, where you can access your big fund houses and big names. Prudential only offer their own internal investment funds within that plan, and that's what provides the more cautious nature. Yes, the returns may be slightly less, but in terms of providing a low risk and conservative investment that can produce with tax efficiency for individuals living in Spain, that's important. So with the returns that can be achieved, with a cautious investor, you're looking at an average return over a 5-year period, just below 5% a year, which is not bad. Which you take, it's better than what banks are offering in Spain for sure. Interest rates in the UK, yes, they're relatively high in terms of recent history, but they are coming down. They're due to come down. They were held recently, but again, in 6 weeks' time, they'll be reviewed again, and they'll be looking to come down. So it makes sense to have a structure that's fitting, that's low risk, and with fairly low minimums as well. But of
what
course,
about terms, Josh? Time-wise, timescales on these investments. Is there minimum, maximums?
Yeah. So Prudential, for example, on that example, they have a 5-year term. So throughout that 5 years, there is an accessibility of 5% per year as a maximum. So that needs to be obviously thought out, and it's not a case of here's an investment, see you later, client. We sit down with the client, understand their needs, their objectives, their assets, and what they're looking for, and provide a recommendation based on those needs. And if a client needs funds to purchase a property or wants to go on a world trip, and will need access to that investment, then Prudential may not be the best advice. So we look at alternate options. But Prudential, for example, 5 years, you would typically need any investment you should have in place for 5 years to get the true returns, because you invest over a 1 or 2 year period. An event can occur like Russia, Ukraine, or the tariff scenario with Trump, or Iran and Israel. These events occur which cause volatility. Good thing with Prudential is they have a soothing return process which eliminates as much volatility as possible to allow that smooth and consistent return. But it is important to make sure that, that if access is needed, we don't set up a plan which is not suitable for that. But terms, you'll be looking at a 5-year term to achieve that consistent return of 5% with a cautious investor, a balanced investor, which most clients are. When we actually come down to it, you're achieving around 6.5% to 7%. On average over that 5-year period. But I wouldn't recommend any client to invest, over a short period of time and look for gains, because events happen and, it can cause these downturns. But over a long period, these downturns do occur, but the general trajectory is upwards.
I actually have invested. My father pushed me years ago when I was first started work to invest in Prudential, and I took out a 10-year policy with them. And I thought 10 years is like, affinity when you're young. And I paid him in my wages to it. And after 10 years, I got an €18,000 lump sum, which to me as a youngster was fantastic money. And it got me my first car. I managed to go out and buy myself a car. So I've done well in the past with Prudential. So, yeah. Yeah,
it shows you. They've been around for a long time. They've got skin in the game. They're a large international corporation, and as you said, especially the younger clients, I have younger clients that are contributing regularly into pension plans, into regular savings plans, that require accessibility, so we have that function built in. But at the same time, time does go by. If you have a long-term horizon, then the chances of growth are even higher. They're fairly high anyway over a 5-year period, but if you've got a longer-term horizon of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus years, the chances that you'll make money are even higher. Or further funds per year, I'm talking about, not over a 10-year period. The year-on-year return is more likely with a longer-term investment. But 5 years is more than enough to achieve a healthy return. Prudential, for example, the cautious investment that I mentioned to you, the Spanish bond, has achieved just over 5% per year on average over that 5 years. 1 year maybe 2%, 1 year maybe 8%. Over an average per year, it's 5.5%, which is.
So, Josh, talk about the minimum. What is the minimum really that somebody would need to put down as an investment?
Yes, the minimum amount for Prudential, I believe it's 25,000. The Prudential, I would typically recommend slightly higher minimums, but the minimum is 25,000. Prudential, that's the most safe and secure option as a Spanish compliant investment. You also have other providers that provide this tax efficient investment structure where you can house investment funds and have a bit more of a say of how the investments are run. As I mentioned earlier, with the external options, external funds, they can accumulate fairly well, but the minimum there is 100,000 euros. And again, with UK pension options, private, work-based, looking at the alternate options that are designed for overseas residents, not for UK residents. So majority of UK pensions are designed for people living in the UK. It makes sense. But the international or non-resident options do have a minimum of 100,000 as well. But that's quite a standard figure in the industry. And a private pension, if you've been contributing for 5-10 years to a private pension, more likely than not that the value will be at or around 100,000 or more. You get these old final salary schemes that, with the old calculations and the way they produce the transfer figure, the figures can reach higher or very high amounts because it's more beneficial sometimes to transfer out of a final salary scheme than it is to stay in. But again, it may not be, so it does need to be looked at for an individual circumstance and the figures around it. But yeah, we help with all of that with our clients. Good.
So, Josh, what would you like to talk about now, mate? Give us some tips on.
What can we? I'll give a small, maybe a little bit of a case study. We can do a comparison between a British couple, typical scenario. A British couple have sold a UK property, hold some assets in the UK, your pensions, your few investments, ISAs, and have moved over to Spain. And we can focus on, the practical outcomes of this. So remaining, with the assets in the UK, British couple, early 50s, recently moved to Spain, keep it in Andalusia, so no wealth tax, of course. Wealth tax that's below 3 million, that is. We didn't mention earlier, actually, that above 3 million, there is an actual tax in Andalusia called solidarity tax, which is similar to a wealth tax, but that's on the higher net worth individuals. But there are products to reduce that or mitigate that. But in this case, moved to Andalusia, so there's no wealth tax. This couple has less than 3 million. Now tax resident, they've got the UK pensions, a couple of ISAs, some premium bonds and cash in the bank, and recently sold UK property. So some of the proceeds are in the bank, generating, small amount of interest that the bank provides. Say that's 250,000. That's in the UK in pounds. So we're going to assume that the ISAs achieve 5% a year as growth, to make it a like-for-like comparison, and look at the pitfalls of that existing structure if the individual remains with their assets in the UK. ISAs are not tax-free in Spain, so the annual gains and income are fully taxable. Premium bonds, again, are not tax exempt. Prizes are treated as income. Currency risk, funds remain in GBP, may erode, any gains made, especially when they convert, how they convert, it needs to be managed. UK pensions may face unnecessary taxation, especially at source, on initial receipts of income, and they're not tailored for overseas residents. They're tailored for UK residents. The exposure to unnecessary income taxes on reinvested gains, and then estate planning. UK-based assets are liable for UK inheritance tax, and those same assets are also liable for Spanish inheritance tax. So, why hold assets in a taxed jurisdiction when you're not living there or don't intend to go back, where there are options to hold the funds in tax neutral jurisdictions? And if an individual that's moved to Spain moves back to the UK, those assets are still efficient, and are still relevant to them living back in the UK. But let's give this a comparison. So after 10 years with those structures still in the UK, growing by 5%, you call that a sort of a compounding interest of up to 63%. That's what it would provide, 5% on 5%, growing. That's in normal terms. With that tax drag though, and foreign exchange risk and, poor efficiency, it may reduce the returns quite substantially. And we'll come on to that in a moment. So if we compare that scenario with the same couple, moved over from the UK, sold the property, holding their pensions, ISAs, but they decide to consolidate their capital, their liquid capital that they have remaining after the new purchase of property in Spain, and place that into a Spanish compliant investment bond, for example, Prudential, as we just discussed. The low risk fund selection, there's tax deferral available until withdrawal, and only a proportional amount of that withdrawal, when it does take place, is liable for tax, which is very efficient. So it's an effective rate of in between 1.9% and 2.6%, rather than, you're paying your ordinary capital gains tax rates year on year. And we'll come on to the differences, what that means at the end of the 10 years. The ISAs and premium bonds would be liquidated to fund that, to the proceeds restructured into that compliant investment. UK pensions transferred into an international, or also known as a non-resident SIP, self-invested personal pension. A lot of people may be aware of SIPs in the UK, very flexible, very accessible. There are SIPs designed for UK non-residents. That can be managed, and the currency can be managed with that. The investments can be managed in alternate currencies, not only GBP. Flexible drawdown options, access how and when, as long as the individual is above 55, soon to be 57 actually. But these alternate structures that are made for non-UK residents need to abide by UK rules, and it remains in the UK, so it still has that overriding protection that the UK offers with regulation from the FCA. And also, with that restructuring for this particular comparison, with this second option, there's better integration with Spanish reporting and tax planning. The investment is automatically reported. There's no need to declare that via the Modulo 720. It's automatically done. That saves a cost. It saves accounting headaches, tediousness. The alternate route, holding assets in the UK, they all need to be reported. They all need to be declared. It could be quite troublesome. And the benefits for the second couple that have moved: tax deferred growth on the investment bond, as I mentioned, only pay tax when drawing. And even then, as I mentioned, it's only on the gain proportion. Simplified reporting for the Modulo 720, which is the overseas asset declaration of over 50,000 if assets are held outside the UK, outside of Spain. Full control and visibility over the assets, not actually based in Spain, which people like. The Spanish compliant investment bond, Prudential, it's actually based in Ireland. Ireland's tax neutral. Spain can't actually embargo that account being based overseas, but it also meets the requirements for an EU compliant structure. Estate planning, the big one. I've had clients that, the husband or wife pass away and they don't know what's going on, where the assets are, if a bank account's been frozen, how do we pay this tax before we can unfreeze the account? An investment structure such as a Spanish compliant investment can be set up in joint names. As soon as the first spouse passes away, the surviving spouse just continues and becomes the full policy holder. Very straightforward. Simply a death certificate needs to be submitted, and it continues in the surviving spouse's name. I can't tell you how many problems that avoids. And yeah, all the investments are aligned with life in Spain, currency, compliance, and tax treatment. And then finally, with this, just to give the comparison with 10 years of growth with investments in the UK being taxed, or a Spanish compliant investment with the tax deferral set up with the same amount of growth on both, so the 5% on each, the Spanish compliant bond could result in around 25% higher net return after tax, which is a huge amount, and we'll come onto that growth figure in a moment and why it's that amount. The pensions as well are flexible, managed by a UK sort of experienced advisor such as ourselves, and also managing experience in managing expatriates with the UK based structures such as the pensions. So you've got best of both worlds, someone that understands the UK setup and the Spanish side of things, and how to best make the most of the pension and how much to draw each tax year, which is actually very, very important to consider that. And yeah, to give you sorry, go on.
Sorry, what you're saying, Josh, is that from what you're saying, you've got to get it taken out of the UK. If you're living here in Spain, you'd be mad to keep stuff like that in the UK. You'd be losing money.
Correct, especially liquid assets. The money in the bank. I get it. Keep some in there, back for holidays or to help the grandchildren or the children. But anything above 50,000, no, because you've got to report that on Modulo 720. Just keep below 50,000. That should be more than enough to keep in the UK if you want to keep some there. But the remainder should be structured, rehoused into something that's more efficient, that can achieve some growth, provide tax benefits whilst they're living and on death, and also for further generations. UK pensions, for example, they would need to remain in the UK, but have something that's designed for non-UK residents, not where it may be that's been sitting there for a long time, unmanaged. UK advisors can't typically advise on overseas individuals now with their pensions. We've seen that a lot. We've had a lot of inquiries from expats that since Brexit, the Brexit EU passporting licenses for UK advisors to advise their overseas clients on UK assets, that's been removed. So, but it makes sense to seek local advice, So we understand the client scenario being feet on the ground in Spain, holding that UK asset, have that structured in the UK for a non-resident, get paid out gross, get paid out, you don't have any withholding tax. You've got an advisor that can actually manage your plan, make sure it's performing well, that meets the criteria of the client on an ongoing basis. We're our clients' advisors for life. It's not just, like I said earlier, here's the product, see you later. We advise our clients. We have regular reviews, quarterly reviews as a minimum, to make sure that everything that we set up is doing what it should be doing. And if it's not, should we make some changes? And that could be a host of reasons, from economic scenarios in the world to personal circumstances. So yeah, it's that's important. And just going back to that very quickly, and I'm sort of boring people, but the difference in growth is quite starstruck. It's quite high. The end figure after 10 years, with the 250,000 invested in year one, based in the UK, and then 250,000 invested in year one, with the investments structured accordingly as a Spanish tax resident in a compliant structure. The final balance of the UK investment would be 348,000. That's based on a 5% growth per year. There's tax obviously to deal with every year in Spain. If you compare that to the Spanish compliance structure, the end result is 407,000. So there's a difference there, or net advantage of £58,000. So in euros, around 65, 70,000 euros, based on the exact same growth figures, you know. So
after how long was that, did you say?
That's 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, so after 5 years, it will be half of that, around 30,000. It's a fair amount, you know, it's around 6,500, 7,000 a year. And that's, you know, that's not considering anything else. That's purely the tax that you'll be saving.
Yeah.
So it's important to look at it.
Sure.
And that's where we help, you know, and as I said at the start, it's not a sales pitch. It's just to give people options, advice, you know, to look at these things, to not, you know, don't think that it won't be applicable to yourself. Clients with inheritance in the future or selling a property, as you mentioned, it's quite common. Spain has some great opportunities, but the wrong structure can be costly. So get it right from the start, or course correct as early as possible, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah. When I moved to Spain originally, I had over 100 grand sitting in the bank doing nothing. I remember the interest was nothing on that, but I've used that money to invest in property here and bought land and done up my house. So that's where my money is, in my property, and it's doing okay. But there are many people like me that I know have sold their properties in UK and bought, not downsized here, but property is cheaper, or was when I moved here. You know, certainly get more for your money here, especially if you're moving inland Spain a little bit. And so they've sold their lifelong house and in the UK, and they've bought a smaller property here. And so, yeah, you know, a lot of them are sitting with money in the bank, just sitting there, literally earning them peanuts with the interest in the bank. So, you know, a talk with someone like yourself could bring them dividends in the very short future. Correct.
Yeah. I mean, some clients, as you said, you know, property. Some clients like property. Nothing against property. I think you should have. If someone has £1 million, for example, they should have a split accordance: property, liquid investments, pensions. You know, that should be split across those three sort of main assets. I'm not saying to people put everything in one basket. Spread it. If you like investment in property, invest in property. But you know, some people, it may cause problems with liquidity and having to sell, or tenants, or you know. Sure. So it's a balance, and
I was always told, my dad always told me years ago when I bought my first property, buy a property you can't lose, buy a property you can't lose. That, you know, money's going through the roof. And I bought during the crisis in the UK, just before it. I bought an apartment, my first apartment, and I was paying 15% interest in the crisis, you know, when the crash of the UK. And I actually sold it several years later and lost 15,000 on the price of the property to get out of it, you know. So I lost money on that. But also, it's all down to time. Later on, when I had another house in UK, I bought it, kept it for 3 years, did a little bit of work on it, sold it, and made a huge profit on it. Again, it's depending on the time you buy and sell. But here in Spain, I don't think you can go far wrong if you're buying, as long as you're careful, and it does relate a lot on areas and things like that here in Spain. But I have seen a big increase in the property prices here, and land prices have gone pretty much through the roof. But it's funny, I bumped into my bank manager a few weeks ago, and when we bought a plot of land to build our house, which was 5 years ago now, he said to me, we haven't lent money to anybody since we lent money to you to build their own house. Talking about British people in the Almeria area. And I went, really? And he said, it's too risky a project now, because people borrow the money for the land and they don't realize the costs involved in, you know, the fees and the construction costs. And there is a time limit now the banks are putting on it for 2 years. So you have to, from buying your land, you have 2 years to complete the house. If you don't, the banks can foreclose on you and ask for that money back. So he said it's got so risky now that for British people in the Almeria area, we're not offering them money, mortgages to buy land with the intent to do houses on them. So there you go.
Yeah. it just shows you. So there are caveats, you know, people need to understand what those caveats are. In longevity, as you mentioned, timescale, you need a bit of luck on your side as well, I think, with most things, you know, but if you stick with things for the majority, then that luck pays off. But yeah, I don't think we're in the crisis right now. Property prices are quite overpriced in Spain. In the UK, they've dropped in value. You know, it just shows you the difference. You know, I was reading an article about property prices in Knightsbridge and Mayfair in the UK, and some of the property prices have dropped 30 to 40% over the last 18 months. You know, and that's a huge amount on quite high valued properties. But it just shows you they're at a discount. You know, some properties. But in Spain, on the other side, you know, we bought our place in 2021. You know, it's gone up nearly double, you know, since we were purchased. But if we're looking to purchase another property, that house has gone up double as well. So it's all relevant, you know. So depends on the country, depends on the location, as you said, inland, by the coast. You can get some still great properties inland in Spain for good prices. So it's
a lot of British people like to move inland a little bit. I've noticed that, you know, they're not so much. I mean, obviously, people like the beaches and the coast areas, but a lot of the British people I know living in the Allbox, Murcia area, and Vera, and they've moved away from the beaches because you can get a lot more for your money. You know, a bigger plot of land and house and garden, swimming pool, and that for sort of half the price, but. You know, and they're putting that money in the bank, and this is why I wanted to do these calls with you, because, you know, I see these people. Recently I went to a big gathering of 3,000 British people in Allbox a little while ago, all down to the radio station I'm with, and you know, I was talking to a few of the people there, and I said to them, you know, that money's just sitting in the bank. You need, I need to talk to somebody. So, you know, it's. I think the British were a little bit slow and a bit very, very cautious and that. But, you know, if you're living your dream life here in Spain and that money's sitting there, it could be buying you quite a few more tapas if you got it invested properly. You know. For
sure. Yeah, it is important, and everyone loves a tapas. You know, they can purchase a few more salchichas in tomato sauce, that's for sure, or carne con tomate. But no, I get it, and people need to have that trust. And what we've done, we've set up a Trustpilot a site, if you like, where our clients, and majority of our clients have written a nice review about us, which is good. We haven't done anything wrong yet, but I'm sure that will never happen. But yeah, so people can check out, you know, when they look at us online, Ambient Wealth, just search that, it comes up lots of information, Facebook page, the website, LinkedIn, the Trustpilot. You see those reviews, so see sort of what other people have thought of us, you know, real life, you know, reviews of us.
So Josh, anything else you want to add quickly before we round this up?
I think that's it, David. I think we've covered most points. You know, we maybe sort of jumped a little bit here and there, but I think we've got the majority of information out.
Lots of useful tips.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't stress enough, you know, that, you know, I hate it when I see people lose out here for different things. And I've done it in the past. When I was here, I was quite green when I first moved there. And there wasn't a help like this, Josh. 24 years ago, there wasn't the Facebook pages. The internet wasn't anything like this. I had to literally come to Spain and learn the hard way. I asked people, and go to the bank managers and pay for interpreters to come and find out things for me. And I lost money on several different things here and learned the hard way. So now there's no excuse for that, you know. So it hurts me when I see people, you know, going down that road. Oh, we've lost this and we didn't know this and didn't know that. So doing these videos is really helpful for people, I think, and putting them out on my information sites can stop people going through some of the problems and losses that I've had over the years here. So Josh, just to recap again, free consultations with you for any of the people that want to listen to this, and I'll leave a link to how they can get in touch with you below this or in the description of this video. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you, Dave, for organising, and thank you all for joining and listening. I know finances can feel quite overwhelming, especially in a different country, but with the right guidance, it really doesn't have to be. So that's what we're here for, and we can provide that initial consultation, as David said,
complementary, see where we can help, what we can do, and potentially put a plan together.
Save yourself some money. Long
Correct.
term. Good. Okay. Thanks very much for helping us today, Josh Williams from Ambient Wealth. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Cheers, David.